Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
All right, so there's a new member of the family that's arrived, at least according to what Tim Cook said. I remember that was one of our final remarks at the end of the last show, Steve. And I believe you said something along the lines of, if it's just another iPhone, it's just another iPhone. And that's apparently what we got, I think. It's just another iPhone. I don't know, like, it's funny that, I've been watching reactions or watching and reading reactions to it, and it's been all over the place from the ultra negative, neutral, and then the positive and all of that. My takeaway actually was a little bit different. Actually, like like I think how we've said before, a lot of Apple's product lines are just bloated with too many models. And what I thought was interesting with this announcement, they canned the iPhone SE and the iPhone 14 models, and all of a sudden, with the iPhone 15 being an outlier, it looks like a cleaner lineup. And I wonder if, you consider things like the iPhone 17 Air coming later in the year, rumors of a pretty big redesign of the Pro models, etc., that maybe this is like their first step into cleaning up the iPhone line a bit. That was my positive takeaway from it. That was what I sensed from it before we get into the discussion of the model itself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. I interpreted it a bit differently, and I actually thought it was quite a clever or astute Apple sort of statement. I mean, what blew me away is it's the phone for me. It's the same factor, same size, with basically the same features, or all the features that I use, at an up-to-date A18 iPhone. And that's when but it's a whole lot cheaper. And that's when it dawned on me what Apple were doing. And basically, that's now the cutoff. So if you've got any model before that, you're basically being abandoned. So my iPhone 13 has still probably got another couple of years in it, but I won't have access to the Apple Intelligence or any of the future features. And that's why they've bought it out. They've said, all right, guys, we're cutting all of you loose before this model, but here's our gift to you, an up-to-date model at an affordable price. And I think that it really shows that Apple Intelligence now is the next step of Apple.
Yeah, I don't know if that's much of a selling point in its current state, but anyway, we can move along right from there. But I mean, what was curious for me, like, I could understand some of the negative reaction in the sense that when it's not another iPhone SE. It's a new. It's more akin to a 16 than a iPhone SE model. But having said that, there are some really curious omissions in the tech specs for the iPhone, particularly around no MagSafe, which they have promoted since the iPhone 12. A lot of accessories depend on it now, and people who like to wirelessly charge. I'm not one of them. I like the old cable for me, but just some very odd things. So like the screen apparently isn't as good, although it's probably still good enough, really, and a couple of other odd features that were missing. But then at the same time, they've got these advancements, like you said. There's the A18 chip, there's the C1 modem, which I thought was really interesting. You can see that they're going to start potentially doing that across the line, with their own custom designed modems. So it's a little bit of an odd beast of a phone. But the other thing I could imagine seeing is that, this time next year we get an iPhone 17e and then an iPhone 18e. And that's where I was kind of thinking that maybe this is where they're trying to streamline the lineup a bit, so that instead of having, I think it was 9 models before it was announced that you could buy before you get into the storage tiers, and by canning some of the older models the way they did, maybe there's some potential for some cleanup and making the lineup make a bit more sense.
I think you're totally right, because let's face it, the SE models were always just old models, so you were going backwards. And I think, with Apple Intelligence now, you can't go backwards. And that's what Apple doesn't want. Apple wants you on their platform. Apple wants you using Apple Intelligence, which will become, I think we've spoken about this before, effectively your AI agent. It will be your window into the internet, finding you what you want to find in the way that you want it delivered. So I think, Apple's basically closing the door on the last 15 years of phone technology. And if we had a post-PC era, maybe this is the post-phone era. We're moving into the AI era, and where phones will actually be an AI entry point into whatever you do. So I think that's what they're saying. And to your point, it cleans up the lineup. If they were to go every year to an E model, that means they'd always be introducing an updated entry-level spec phone without it being 4 or 5 years old technology, which is what we've seen with the SE models in the past. So it makes a lot of sense. I kind of like it because I'm not a heavy user of phones or socials. I kind of actually like what it offers, but I'm very old-fashioned.
Oh, well, the thing is that these phones are just so good now that a phone at that price point is going to do everything you really need it to do. And, if it wasn't for the fact, like for myself, I'm really buying the cameras and for the edge cases, which is why I go for the Pro models. But if it wasn't for that, I probably, would be getting something like this anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I think now what you'll see is this is the base platform for Apple moving forward, in the same way that the silicon range in the M chips is for the laptops. You wouldn't get away now with an Intel chip Mac. So it's all Apple intelligence from here on.
Absolutely. I did want to touch quickly on, obviously there's still some, refresh models coming up with new MacBook Airs, new low-cost iPad, and amongst other things. The only thing I wanted to mention that I thought would be interesting to circle back to that C1 modem of theirs. I'm just wondering if, as we see these products being announced in the next couple of months, if we start seeing it show up in some of these devices now. So like the low-cost iPad that's due for a refresh might be good for a tier with a C1 model in it, app modem in it. What about the MacBooks? Putting cellular connectivity into a MacBook like that to me, I mean, I don't know if I'd use that, but I can imagine that there could be a use case for that for some people.
I think there would be now. I mean, why hotspot? And this is the post-PC era, truly when effectively your laptop becomes your phone, becomes your laptop. I think we're starting to see huge movement in terms of usage and the way people are using things, and I would even dare to add, for some people, they probably don't even use a laptop anymore. It's all on the phone.
Absolutely.
Or iPad.
Absolutely. All right, let's segue away from that. I was a bit concerned when I read this story about Amazon taking creative control of James Bond, but let me just preface that by saying that this could potentially go one or two ways. I'm seeing the potential for TV shows and content being produced now, not just the movies. On the flip side of, if you're looking at it from a positive perspective, Amazon Studios actually has created some quality TV, but I'm thinking of shows like Reacher, Fallout, there was another one that was off the top of my head. The Boys, I think, was the other one that comes to mind. So it's not as if it's impossible for them to say, if they wanted to create a James Bond show, there's a chance they might do a good job with it. The Rings of Power show is probably an outlier in that, because that didn't turn out terribly well. But the flip side of this is that I'm just thinking of Star Wars, Star Trek, and a whole bunch of other franchises where they got sold off from either from the original creator or the controlling interest, or anyone that was at least maintaining the legacy. So in the case of Star Wars, it was like severing the connection with George Lucas. With Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry left, I think he died in 91, but he had a successor that carried on his legacy for at least throughout the rest of that decade. So that whole wave during the 90s still maintained his vision, but by the time you get to, the mid 2010s, it all just went out the window. And I'm just concerned that this is where James Bond's going to go, because the James Bond franchise historically has been the big cinematic event every couple of years. The family has had, the Broccoli family have had a very tight control of, it must have X, Y, and Z and must be executed in a certain way. And there's just the potential that the corporation coming in and just going, hey, yeah, let's make T-shirts, let's make, 3 different TV shows, using a peripheral character as the star character, and all that sort of stuff. It's not to say that maybe they could create good stuff out of that. It's not impossible, but I have concerns.
Ben, if the next James Bond starts with the last one having been all a dream, then maybe I can see a future for James Bond.
I was about to say it's prophetic that he died at the end of the last movie then.
I personally thought that was a statement that this was the future for James Bond and that there would be a whole new James Bond thing, but you've already pretty much said it. And I think probably the example that comes to mind that's probably closest for me, and if anyone else is a Doctor Who fan, they would understand. So there's classic Doctor Who, and there's obviously the current Doctor Who series. I actually think that they've done the current series really, really well in terms of being true to Doctor Who, the classic Doctor Who. But it ain't classic Doctor Who. And it doesn't matter how you dress this up. As you said, James Bond was a big cinematic event, and James Bond acted in a certain way, and certain villains acted in a certain way, and certain things happened in a James Bond film, and we loved it. I just think James Bond actually died at the end of the last James Bond, and that's it. So whatever they do now will look like James Bond. It'll be called James Bond, but it ain't going to be James Bond. It's going to be people doing James Bond kind of things, and that's the best outcome we could possibly hope for if the content's good.
And that's the thing that concerns me. And you can see it applied to so many franchises now. Like Doctor Who was another one I was going to mention, actually, because that's been in the news recently for being cancelled, actually, in its current form. But what was kind of it's like, why go on with the name other than that the name has name recognition and you can easily sell it if the actual execution of it doesn't have anything to do with what it actually was about it to begin with. That to me is the problem with current pop culture entertainment. Yeah. In the past, it's like create a new franchise and sell it and make it modern for, the current culture, and it'll probably be successful, but there doesn't seem to be any guts to do that.
Look, you could make Back to the Future 4 tomorrow. You could get Lucas back to make some new Star Wars, but even with Lucas there, it ain't going to be Star Wars anymore. It's just going to be more films called Star Wars. It's not to diminish anyone's enjoyment. If it's a good film, you'll still go and see it and enjoy it, but I just wish they would let some things run their course.
Absolutely.
You can't have 20 feature films under a franchise and think there's anything special about them.
What else is there to mine?
Except for James Bond. And it's been done.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, and still sticking with our movie. It's good that we're touching base with movies again. We don't do it too often these days. This last story, to end on an amusing note, who knows? Maybe this will catch on. Maybe it'll go to other countries too. But this in India, this man that sued a cinema chain for a paltry amount of money, but I think it was more for the principle of the thing, that he had his time wasted because they said the session would start at 4 p.m, but the actual movie didn't start till 4:30 4:30 because they showed him 30 minutes of ads, and he, basically sued to get his time back, I guess would be the lack of a better term. And I've seen some other commentary around this that if, it could, say if it were, to be picked up in other countries, the idea would be that session times would actually have listed the session starts at, say, 4 o'clock, but the movie starts at 4:30, and then there's like concerns around, the cinema chain losing money because they know that people won't show up until when the movie starts because they don't want to see ads, and then they'll lose advertising revenue. And then there was a whole rabbit hole of stuff that I thought was amusing.
Ben, all I could think of, and I love this story and I support this guy, but all I could think is we've found the Indian George Costanza. It's great. Like he's like, he's they owe me, Jerry. Except he won in this case a little bit. I love this. I think we all go to the cinema and, don't mind a few trailers. Don't mind a reminder to switch off my phone. Don't even mind a couple minutes of ads. But sometimes it does get excessive.
Absolutely. Alrighty, we might wrap it up there, Steve. Might have to time if I ever do go to the cinema next. I'm not sure exactly when that'll be, but I might have to time how long the ads are, because I know it feels like it's 20 or 30 minutes, but it might be worth just getting it out.
It's really the time to go to the shop and get yourself chopped up.
Yeah, for $10 or something. Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so that's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.